that would have been the next best thing, right? If I couldn't be in theater, I'll be a TV writer. But I had no sense of self. I was so scared. I grew up so financially unstable that the only thing I wanted was financial stability.
I'm Charla Larston. I've been a TV writer for almost a decade, but it wasn't that long ago that quitting my day job and moving to Hollywood was nothing but a pipe dream. After lots of failures, many mistakes, and many lessons learned, I've now written for 7 TV shows, 2 features, and sold 3 TV pilots. I've done all this through imposter syndrome, burnout, and with zero roadmap. On the Working Writer podcast, I pull back the curtain on breaking in and teach screenwriters and creatives how to thrive both personally and professionally. Without further ado, let's get to work. Welcome to another episode of the Working Writer podcast. Thank you so much for joining me once again. If this is your first time here, thank you for tuning in. If you've been here a bunch and you haven't left a review, if you haven't subscribed, if you haven't left a thumbs up, please do that. It helps me out so much. And if you are tuning in and have been tuning in and you don't like it, well, you should probably leave a review and let me know as well, because I'd like to know what's up. I'm very excited for today's episode. My guest today is Tara Schuster. She's a former executive at Comedy Central. She was heavily involved in Key Peele, the massively successful sketch show. And she also happens to be the executive that was in charge of my Comedy Central sketch show when I sold a show to Comedy Central. And she was one of the most fantastic execs I've ever worked with. And I actually kind of developed a friendship with Tara, which is also out of the norm. I usually don't become like super good friends with my executives that I sell shows to or who are in charge of the shows that I work on. So I think it says a lot about Tara and who she is. And what was also more shocking, because she was such a wonderful executive, is when I saw that she left Comedy Central and she pivoted to being a self-care author. And her book, Buy Yourself the Fucking Lilies, has blown up and she sold a ton of copies and it's been massively successful. And I was absolutely dying to know the story behind what happened. Like, how did Tara go from being an exec at Comedy Central, working on shows like Key Peele, working with comedians like me, to becoming a self-care author? And the story is super fascinating. It's really heart-wrenching. And I think it's also a really beautiful testament to what is possible for all of us as writers and creatives and just people who are seeking to do what we want to do and what we love to do. I hope you enjoy this episode. Here's my interview with Tara Schuster. Tara Schuster, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I am dying to have this conversation. Like, I can't even tell you how excited I am to have this conversation, because I know you from another life when
Yes.
you were an executive at Comedy Central and we were developing a show together. And now I look up and you are a freaking best-selling author of self-help books that are fantastic.
Thank you.
So I'm just kind of like, obviously, like, I mean, I don't even know where to start, Tara, honestly.
I know.
Honestly, Tara, okay, here's where I'm going to start. Like, I'm just fascinated by this transition that you made, and I just kind of want to hear the backstory. Like, I kind of want to hear who you are, where you come from, how you got into Comedy Central, and then how you made this like really big shift to becoming an author.
So it's so funny because you know the quote unquote real me before I became, a self-care author. And,
Yeah.
The past 4 years have been basically traveling the world, talking about mental health and these things that had nothing to do with my job. And we met at Comedy Central because I love your work and I think you're so funny. And we were lucky enough, I wanted to do a sketch comedy show with you on the network.
Yeah.
I remember the gluten-free sketch you wrote, like it was yesterday, made me giggle.
Yeah.
And so you met me in my professional context, but what you probably didn't know was that I was suffering from severe anxiety and depression and had grown up in a neglected, psychologically abusive household, and everything was a shit show inside. Like,
I
I'm
just want to
curious.
say, yeah.
Yeah. I'm
I
like,
just want to
yeah.
say that I would have never had an inkling. Is that what you're curious
Yeah.
about? If I could
How did
tell?
I come
No.
off? Like,
You
how?
came off as completely competent. Number one, I found you to
Yeah.
be one of my favorite execs. We've had dinner together. I don't have dinner with execs all the
Yeah.
time. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like we became friends.
Yes.
You came to my house
Yes.
after George Floyd. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
you're just like a real, like, you're a friend. So I'm just like, I thought you were an excellent, extremely competent exec. You had shepherd, you know, you were very much a part of Key and Peele and things like that. So it's not like I could see that you have chops and you know what you're doing. And you also came across as super confident and like really present and really like engaged and happy. And I feel like when we're in our trauma, when we're in our, you know, subconscious programming, we're not really present. We're not really
Yeah.
here. So I don't know how you were managing it. I would have never guessed. Yeah.
Well, by that point, I had done a solid 5 years of work and had actually already written my first book, Buy Yourself the Fucking Lilies, which I wrote in the mornings before work. So,
Wow.
I'd get up at 6 and I'd write for a couple of hours, and then I'd go to Comedy Central to be an executive. And for me, working is like being in flow and being present with the artist. I'm always my best self if I'm working. So it's just great to know that I never came off as, oh no, or that you didn't even know. It's just cool that like you knew me. I sometimes forget, oh yeah, I was an executive.
I know.
Like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I ran Key and Peele
Yeah.
on behalf of the network. Forgot
Right.
that happened. I had a whole other career. So yeah, that's really, really interesting to hear. And by the way, just up top, so
Yeah.
anybody listening who thinks they can't make an extreme pivot,
Yeah.
I have only made extreme pivots.
Well, tell me about them. Let's hear
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. So, I gave a little context. I grew up in a mess wreck disaster of a house in Brentwood, which is like a fancy area in LA. So everything looked really good on the outside. My mom's a doctor, my dad's a lawyer. But in the inside, I mean, the literal foundation of the house was built on a mudslide prone, earthquake weak, shaky foundation. Like if you were to write a sketch, it would be too much if you said, well, what if we built the house so that it's constantly crumbling?
Wow.
But growing up, it was always some project to save the house. It was dangerous. And it was psychologically dangerous. And I exited my childhood thinking I was worthless. That was the number one message I received was you are worthless. Because as a child, your parents reflect you the reality of the world. And so if they don't see you and if they're not attuned to your needs, you can't have needs. You can't have a clear picture of who you are. So the one thing I could do though to get hugs, and that's what I'm talking about, like basic
Yeah.
level, like never hugged, never told you proud of you. No, this is silly and I haven't even talked about it anywhere, but never like a bedtime story.
Yeah.
It just kind of sucked. It's what I'll just put the word sucked on the whole thing.
Yeah.
But external validation was available to me. And so I was just a hustler. I'm also a millennial. So I was sold this idea that my job would be my self-worth. I remember all the commencement addresses at the time were find your joy, find your bliss.
Yeah.
You'll never work a day in your life. And I'm
Right.
like, cool, is this desk job my bliss? Is this really supposed to do it for me? But I bought in. I drank the Kool-Aid, mostly for my own survival. And so I, got through high school, got through college, ended up going to a really good college, which I thought would save my life. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Got to Comedy Central. I was an intern at The Daily Show with Jon Stewart first,
Cool.
it was, and I'm so glad he's back.
Yeah.
Oh my God. But I'll speak to that. I know.
Yeah.
But I know. I'll speak to that in a second. But actually, because this is a writing podcast,
Mm-hmm.
so I went to Brown for playwriting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I had a whole other vision of my life. I specifically went to Brown because Paula Vogel, who's a fantastic playwright, she ran the program there. She's won the Pulitzer Prize for How I Learned to Drive. She then went on to run Yale's playwriting program. Like at the
Wow.
time, Brown was the place for
Mm-hmm.
playwrights. Sarah Rule went there. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, so I was, oh my God, I'm going to be a playwright. I started working at the Public Theater after I graduated from college, and also every indie theater because I was like hustly,
Mm-hmm.
so a million side gigs. None of them paid.
Mm-hmm.
All of them were like, we'll pay you in wine. I'm like, I cannot subsist off of this.
Yeah.
And that's actually why a friend of mine in theater said, hey, I just interned at The Daily Show. You should give it a try. And that's why I pivoted to TV, because I just honestly didn't have the chutzpah, the wherewithal, the bravery to just dive into theater and writing in particular. And I would have wanted to be a TV writer. That would have been the next best thing, right? If I couldn't be in theater, I'll be a TV writer. But I had no sense of self. I was so scared. I grew up so financially unstable that the only thing I wanted was financial stability, and structure. So after The Daily Show, I was hired by Comedy Central to be a PA for their website called jokes.com.
Oh, wow.
So
Never
my
heard of it.
yeah, my friends are all like, I work at McKinsey, I work at Goldman Sachs, or I'm at the Public Theater. I'm like, I'm at jokes.com. It was really quite a humiliating experience, but I had to basically, as the lowest person on the totem pole, I was transcribing all of their stand-up, all of it. So that meant I ingested, hundreds and hundreds of hours. Every Comedy Central presents, Premium Blend, these series that like nobody remembers. I watched them all. And so I got like this amazing crash course in comedy immediately. And from there, I just sort of, I kept moving up and finding new opportunities. And I didn't want to be in digital, because digital at the time was also like the redheaded stepchild that everyone wanted to pretend was just like a fad, or it's like a step kid and whatever. Soon enough, we'll be rid of them.
Nobody knows what this is.
No, Wild West.
Right.
TV is the only thing that matters.
Right.
So I hated it. I absolutely hated it. I never get to talk about this.
Yeah.
I hated my job with my full body for 4 years.
Okay.
For 4 years, I hated every single day. The only reason I did it was I thought it was a grad school in digital and comedy. And
we're kind of right.
And my dad actually pointed out to me, he was, who I have a very challenging relationship with, another way to look at this job was they were paying me to learn about comedy.
100%.
So that's what I hated it. And I was like, okay, this is my real education. And from there, I saw that Key Peele, I saw the pilot, and I was just, oh my God, I know this is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, there weren't that many people at the pilot stage, who were like, oh my God, later for sure. So I campaigned to become the digital producer on that.
Very cool.
And that's what led to everything, because I was embedded in the offices of Key Peele, and I just did everything for them. Their Facebook updates, Twitter. That time was the Wild West as well. So I really could do anything. I ended up weirdly segment producing. If you've seen Obama's Anger Translator, have you ever seen?
Of course.
I segment produced all of them except the one in the original.
Wow.
In the pilot. With things that are not what the digital producer does.
Yeah.
And it was because I was voracious, because I was always pitching things. That was my complete life.
Can I ask, what does a segment producer specifically do?
Everything.
Mm-hmm.
So that meant, my kind of idea, it might not have been my idea, it might have been somebody else's. But the idea was we would leave holes in the show so that we could put topical Obama sketches in, because it was the election. It was Obama and Mitt Romney.
Yeah.
So to keep it topical, this is what we were going to do. And to do it, I realized, oh, I have a budget within digital. What if they premiered on digital? What if we did something cool here? And so it's funny looking back, I like begged the other departments for a budget. So first off, that's part of it, right? You're pulling together the sources. Nobody was like, here's $100,000. It was like, digital, do you have 20 grand? Marketing, do you have 20 grand? Promo, like everybody give me money. We got a budget together. We built a set, which I oversaw, like putting the set together, which was very little. I'm trying to remember if we did it literally in their offices. We did Van David and Mike in their offices, but anyway, it means you're helping with the script. You're overseeing the edit. You're
This
literally
is for promo. This is not the actual sketch that is shot in the show.
Yes, it was the actual sketch
that
was
this
shot
is
in the
the
show.
Actual sketch. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we just kept it open for digital. So like because they wanted to be relevant and topical.
Yeah.
We did it in digital. And I'm actually right now sort of wondering if I'm confusing memories. It was actually in the show, but I'm wondering if Van Davian and Mike, the web series, that I was way more involved in and oversaw every little piece. But I was doing weird TV stuff as the digital person.
Because you were saying that you were doing digital. So I assumed that you were doing the segment production of like any of the kind of non-linear show kind of digital producing.
These were linear.
Okay.
For Obama's Anger Translator was linear, and it was just a weird circumstance of money that digital was the one funding it, so I was the one running it.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then Van David and Mike, which was their web series companion, which ended up.
I'm such a nerd that of course I've watched.
So that is my baby. That was Emmy nominated, Van David and Mike.
Hilarious.
And then I became Emmy unnominated for that. But that is a completely different story. And I have taken us way down a road. I hope people, I feel like I have rambled about Key Peele. They're amazing, by the way.
I'm so glad to hear it, because you never know.
Oh, they're like the best people.
Oh,
totally.
That's wonderful. That's really cool. But I mean, we're not down a rabbit hole because this is all a part of your story. But you know, to me, you have such a big story because of everything I've kind of watched you do just in the time that I've known you. So let's keep it moving. So you were working as, you took this jokes.com job that you just hated. Everybody else was doing quote unquote real jobs, which was the exact same thing for me when I was doing stand-up comedy. All of my friends were in law school or like in med school. And I'm like freaking out, like, am I making a horrible, horrible decision? But ultimately we do what we want to do. We can't live other people's lives. So you're there, you make the best of it. You end up working on this gold mine of a show. And then what?
So they ended up trusting me so much. And then I ended up, again, with this voracious need to succeed. It was like a dual two rivers or something coming together that I ended up leaping from their digital producer to the executive in charge, the development executive of the TV show. Yeah, that doesn't happen. That's not like a thing. But I think when you prove your value, prove your worth, when you're really a trustworthy member of that team, great things can happen. And that's how TV.
Can I ask a tea question? A little bit of tea.
Please.
Did you replace another executive that was already there?
I think there were a couple job openings.
I see.
There had to have been an open headcount, but I think it was somebody who left. I think he left to do the guys who did the Lego movie.
Okay.
Whatever. There was people who left of their own accord to go on to amazing things.
All right. I'm not digging for bad stuff.
No. That's heads up. You're totally right. Yeah. And I campaigned because it wasn't a natural transition.
Yeah. Very cool. Is there anything specific you remember about that transition? Because in my mind, being in in TV, and knowing a lot of people who have worked on like the digital production side of a particular show, leaping to executive producing the entire show is a huge leap. That
Oh
is
yeah.
like, what was that? Like, what did, do you remember anything specific about what you did or what mindset you were in that like made you be able to make that kind of leap?
Yeah, I wouldn't take no for an answer. That's all it was. Everyone told me I couldn't do it, but everyone had told me I couldn't do everything, including my whole childhood.
Mm-hmm.
So I was so used to just, and it's not like it didn't hurt every time I was told, and I was told specifically, you can't move from digital to development because you don't know any agents or any TV people. You don't Many development executives, the way they get their job is they start as an assistant to a manager or agent, and then they work their way up to coordinator, and then they get to a network. And it's important because then they have all these relationships, they know all the comedians, they've seen
Right.
all their work. Hollywood's super creepy, and there's always like four people on any phone call that, you and I talking, but then both of our assistants on the
Right. Right.
line
Right.
taking notes. So you really get an education by
Yeah.
taking all those notes, knowing all those people. I had none of that, zero. So I was told, okay, you definitely can't get this job. But what I had was this deep knowledge of digital and the artistry. I mean, I had gone to Brown for playwriting. Like, I knew what I was talking about when I was looking at a script. So it wasn't like didn't know anything. And the development team had zero clue what was happening in digital, like none whatsoever. So my job, I pitched it that way. I will bring you guys up to speed. And so I also ended up running the show at midnight and that was like just perfect timing. I got really lucky on that one because it was such a digital centric show. They needed someone who knew what they were doing to take over that show. So my mindset, and it's always been this way, everyone will tell you you can't pivot, you can't do something. They're really talking about themselves, their own fears, their own experiences, what they deem possible just for them. It has nothing to do with you. You can pivot. That's all I've done.
I have a couple of questions for you because what we're talking about kind of brings up two things for me specifically. And first, I'm just going to say them so that I keep them in mind. First is that like this chip on your shoulder that you have, of I got to prove everybody right, wrong.
Yeah.
I got to prove myself.
Yeah.
um Whenever I have, done things like that, it's helped me do great things. But it's also what I think one of the things that led to my burnout. I had this like really giant burnout because what I realized is that even though this can be really motivating fuel at a certain point, at the root of it, it is dirty fuel. It is a lack of worthiness and the proving myself. It's not that I can't do it. It's not that all this other stuff. It's just the fuel that's getting me there is kind of dirty fuel. It's not actually recharging me and replenishing me. Ultimately, what it does is it drove me into the ground. So that's the first thing is like driving yourself with this kind of I got to prove everybody wrong kind of thing. And I want to know, did that work out well or did it not work out well? And two, is that going into a work situation where you're in a higher level, there's a lot more pressure, everybody's watching you, all this other stuff. To me, it's like it kind of sets you up to fail. You know what I mean? Because I don't know. I think there's just like a lot of it of like when you go into these situations where you're taking this huge leap like that and there's all this information you don't know what you don't know, it sets you, I think it sets people up for imposter syndrome, or it has set me up for imposter
Yeah.
syndrome. And it has and if I'm not in the right mindset with that imposter syndrome, that can also be a really negative thing because then I'm catering to my ego of like, I don't want to look bad, I don't want to look stupid, so I'm not going to ask questions, I'm not going to do these kinds of things. So those are the two things. Did it work out for you to continue to push yourself with this kind of I gotta prove everyone wrong kind of fuel? And did you experience any kind of imposter syndrome, like, or any big, hard That's what she said.
Couldn't
Obstacle.
resist.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Obstacle when you got to this job.
Yeah, I relate on both levels, and the first question about burnout is very relevant to me now and the kind of work I do. 100%. The reason that I climbed the corporate ladder so quickly. The other thing to note in all this is I was super young.
Right.
Like,
You're in your 20s.
yeah,
Yeah.
this was late 20s, early 30s. I'm one of the youngest VPs ever.
Nuts.
Yeah. So I was burning out, and it was completely the need to prove myself 100%, because it was this fancy, glamorous job. Jordan Peele is shouting me out from the stage of the Emmys. The moments like that said to me, I am worthwhile. I didn't, I might have come from this quote unquote odd household, but look at me now. Like, I made it. And I did completely, and but honestly, then it also gave me the willpower to write a book. You know, when I talk to other authors about writing a book and having a really stressful job like TV executive, they laugh at me. That's not how you do it. That's crazy. Looking back, I actually don't know how I physically was able to, other than I have in my camera roll on my phone photos. I would take a photo at every desk I was at. So,
Aww.
like a bachelorette,
Yeah.
if I was going, I would demand that one room have a desk or figure out a desk situation. And I would skip a bunch of stuff to write.
Wow.
So now looking back, I'm like, okay. And it was worth it. So the grind, the hustle got me really far. Got me, 2 books that have sold over 250,000 copies.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, but I'm the one who's the most surprised of all. And then you run out of fuel.
Yeah.
And then you actually have to figure out, I can't overwhelm my way through my life. How do you gentle your way through your life? But maybe this is controversial, but I'm not sure that it's possible to do it any other way. The sheer amount of work, and I'm not saying that's good.
Yeah.
But the amount of work, just man hours that I had to pull off in those 12 years. And maybe there are really well-adjusted people who had amazing childhoods who have done and then were able to accomplish that much. But I would be surprised if that were the case. Now, I'm not saying it didn't work for me, like just knowing me. If I knew I was worthy, I probably would have just gone into TV writing. I probably would have had a completely different path. I would have just started being a writer. And since that was more aligned, maybe it would have been more gentle and easy. The whole choice would have been different. So I think right now I'm at a point where I wish I could overwhelm my way through something. I don't have it in me anymore. Like, I do not have that dirty fuel in me. Sometimes I'm like, oh my God, why can't I just get this thing done? A previous version of me would. And then I have to remember, because a previous version of me only thought that my work was what mattered. And so it was like life or death.
Right.
Cool. And and now I'm good. Now the leaps that I take feel a lot more aligned, a lot more, they do feel gentler, although they have all their issues too.
Right. So you're not in survival mode anymore, it sounds
exactly.
Like. That's just what it is. You're just operating in a totally different way.
Exactly.
So that's awesome. So then what did it look like when you made that leap? Was there imposter syndrome? Did you deal with anything?
But it wasn't imposter syndrome. I didn't know things. Right. It was lack of knowledge.
But that is what imposter syndrome is. You think that the fact that you don't know something is a you problem instead of the fact that you don't know something.
Well, imposter syndrome, first off, the term imposter syndrome is problematic because it turns this into a pathology that's our fault that we did it.
Right.
In the original study, it's actually called imposter phenomenon. And
interesting.
It's really interesting, the history of imposter syndrome. The organizational psychologist Adam Grant often talks about there is a real difference, though, between noticing a gap in knowledge, which is what I had, and having knowledge and feeling like you don't have enough. I didn't have the knowledge. so sometimes I felt bad that I didn't have the knowledge, but I'm also shameless. So I just asked everybody all the time. I was always asking questions. I never was quiet about it. I often said, I don't know this. Can you help me? Like little things, on like a budget, stuff avails. What did anyone mean when they said tech avail? I had no idea. So I just didn't mind being the person who didn't know. And also, I think at the time, I think later when I started doing meditation and thinking about being in beginner's mind, it's just not a problem to me not to know things. At first, it feels bad. And then you're like, oh, this just means I have a lot to learn. And I wasn't going to take any shit from anybody. Like, the only thing that got on my nerves were people who were promoted or got perks who maybe knew the agents, but I did not think were doing a good job on behalf of the company.
Okay.
That would drive me wild.
Okay.
With anger.
Well, okay. When did you get into meditation? Like, when did this kind of, when did you start, like, what made you start writing the book?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the book just started off as a Google Doc to save my life because, had really not good flirtations with suicidal ideation over all the
Ooh.
years. We talk about it and I talk about my story like it's funny, but my life was in danger many times. And that's why I thought, okay, I'm not to blame, but now this is my responsibility. I have to take care of myself. Nobody else is going to do it. I don't have mentors. That's another piece of all this is you can do all this without mentors. I didn't have a wise adult telling me what to do. I, read memoirs like they were my mentors and took the lessons I learned there and tried to apply them to my own life, especially in comedy. Like Steve Martin is a great one. Born Standing Up was one of my
Wonderful book.
Bibles.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. And so the I was just a Google Doc that I started when I was 25. I did it for 5 years. And this means, reading memoir like their self help, creepily watching my friends and their parents interact and kind of figuring out what their dynamic is. I mean, and other things like what are values, what are principles, what are vegetables, genuinely, what are they? Which one should I be eating? Like very basic things too. I did that for 5 years. At the end of 5 years, I had a 600-page Google Doc and felt like a different person. And that's when I realized I have an offering because I'm like not that special. There's no way other people haven't been through some shade. Maybe you weren't in as extreme in a situation as I was in. Maybe you're in much, much worse. But maybe you had parents who totally nurtured you and you can still relate to feeling not worthy enough. Your parents walk in with all kinds of baggage and they don't even know it half the time, right? So we all have these gaps where we need help in reparenting. So that's, I had always wanted to be a writer though. So I was doing this project, this Google Doc to save my life. It has nothing to do with publication. I didn't even think about that. At the same time, a detail that nobody else knows, because I was working on Key and Peele, Jay Martell actually was helping me with a pilot that an original pilot because I thought I'm going to leap from here to TV writing. That's what I'm going to do. And I finished the pilot and it's really good. And there's interest at WME to represent me, to take it out. And I just put it in a desk. I was just too scared. I just like way too scared of financial instability. That was like the main thing. And decided, okay, I'm just going to continue to be an executive. But the desire to write never left me. So I started submitting to the New Yorker slush pile and I started getting in. And once I started getting in, I don't know, books just seemed like a safer route, probably because it wasn't in TV. Because if I had taken a comedy out and pitched it, I don't think I could have kept my executive job. I would have had to quit. But a book, they carved out of my contract, and I was like, I'm realizing that in the moment. That's actually probably why I just continued. I also always wanted to be an author.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't even remember what the original question is, but
Just the why you wrote a book. And it sounds like
yeah,
it was because it seemed like the best way to express yourself as a writer.
absolutely.
Which I just think is so funny that you say that you didn't want to, you canceled out TV writing because you did not want the instability. Which is so funny because it's true. It is not a particularly stable career unless you're literally like in the very top of
The
the
lucky,
pile. Yeah,
I mean,
lucky. Yeah, it's true. It is luck as well.
I nobody knows this, but I actually had a deal to turn my first book into a TV series and was in development working on it. And I found the whole process so miserable that I essentially quit
Tara.
my own show about my own life.
Tara, no.
I
No,
hate it. Yeah.
you did not.
Yeah. And it was a
you
really
a
good
de-
idea.
you a development executive did not quit your own development because of how annoying and obnoxious
Yes, I
development
did.
is.
Yes, I did.
That's insane.
Yeah. I realized this dream that I had to be a TV writer, I hadn't realized the hours.
Yeah.
So now as an author, right, I can go speak. I
Yeah.
can go on a retreat. I can coach people. My income in a lot of ways is up to me. But as a TV writer in the process, I met 42 times on this project to turn the TV show into, that's a lot.
42.
Yes, and I
Yeah.
can't really talk about what
Sure.
transpired, but
Sure.
it was miserable. I had a horrible, horrible, horrible time. Everyone treated me poorly. I shouldn't say that, but it's true.
It's true, yeah.
Um, and nobody cared that at the time I was a best-selling author in the comedy category. So like Trevor Noah's Born a Crime, and then I'm like number 2 in Amazon or whatever. And they treated me like I had never worked in comedy, that I didn't know anything. And that's when I also realized, wow, writers are treated so badly. I had no idea. So when writers would come, I'd hear that their contract was delayed at business affairs. And I'd think, oh, yeah, that sucks. But moving on, it doesn't really matter. On the flip side, it took 1 year to negotiate my deal.
Yeah.
And it took them an additional year to pay me,
Yeah.
which my lawyer wrote to them, are you punking us? And and he's like a fancy real lawyer. And to which I said to him, like, if they're hard up for cash, I can give them a loan, but they should let us
so
know.
Funny. Wow.
So yeah, no interest in
Brutal.
TV.
Absolutely brutal. And you said how badly they treat writers. This is how badly they treat TV writers specifically.
Oh,
because,
yeah.
Yeah.
As a
TV
published
writing,
author,
yeah.
I feel like I get treated.
No, you get way more respect.
Oh yeah, way more respect. And my product. What I love about books is my book will get to live. Whether
It's
or not
yours.
people buy it.
Yeah.
Right. It won't get canceled. There's no unless it gets canceled for other reasons. But it also won't. I don't need to make a pilot. Right. Like nobody's green lighting the series. It's a book. They buy it with the intention of selling it. Unless you really mess up, it's for sure going to be published.
Interesting. Well, this is a great spot to take a break. And when we come back, I want to get into the publishing process for Buy Yourself a Fucking Flowers. And we're back. What was the publishing process like?
So I had a very, I think, abnormal route because I had sat through a gajillion pitches. So in development, you're sitting through constant pitches of, we want to do this show. Here's what the show idea would be. Here's the talent attached. Here's how we'd market it. Right. I knew what executives responded to in a pitch. And so the pitch for Buy Yourself, the Fucking Lilies was, it actually went viral within publishing. Like, I know that pitch was amazing. And had it not been amazing, there would have been something seriously wrong with me. Like shame on me for not using all that experience. And
So you're
yeah,
saying that the experience of sitting in a bunch of TV pitches helped you write a book pitch?
yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
What was it?
Because when we're looking at a TV pitch, the number one thing I always looked for was point of view. Why are you the person to write this? Why are you the person to make this TV show? Why is it urgent? Why does it happen right now? What's the world like? Do you really see tonally what it is? Do you see how these characters develop? Can you imagine a complete story arc with these characters? Those are all the same things you need in a book. And I also knew that I had a lot of contacts in Hollywood at this point. And in publishing, Hollywood is very fancy. So I could I could also put that,
Yeah.
these people will blurb it. I have all these experiences. And I wasn't writing a self-care book having never done anything in my life. I had achieved a lot by the point at which I wanted to write this book. So it gave it a lot of more legitimacy. But absolutely sitting through pitches, really understanding which ones resonated with me. Here's like a small thing. Pitches that start with telling the story, a personal anecdote about why, I responded more to than pitches that didn't, that talked about some like general societal thing. So my pitch from the jump is super voicey. It's immediately into the story and why it matters to me and why it is urgent that right now this needs to be made. I don't know that that's obvious if you haven't sat in a pitch before. So yeah, I applied all my TV pitching to my book pitching.
Wonderful. Amazing. And then so it became buzzy in the publishing world because of
Yeah.
this wonderful pitch.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
So it actually went to auction.
Very cool.
So, different publishing, and I'm only like explaining this in detail because it's such an opaque process,
Yeah.
and I really want to let people into what it actually is. And the nice thing about pitching for publishing is they'll only take a meeting with you if they're interested and likely to say yes. Whereas in TV, you're going into cold rooms. You have no idea. The executives probably haven't looked at anything. They're supposed to watch a video. They probably didn't. They're supposed to read 5 pages. They probably didn't. In publishing, not only have they read everything you sent them, they've basically already made up their minds. And again, are only going to see you if they're into you, because those pitches are more about wooing you and like talking about what the project would be like with them. So the pitch document is actually of paramount importance, because that gets you, that's like really the first step. Words really matter. What you write really matters,
Did
right?
you have like a publishing agent or whatever it's called at that point?
Yes.
You did?
Yeah. So I actually said, I was at Just for Laughs in Montreal, and I said to Sarah Babineau, who ended up being one of the heads of Comedy Central, we're at dinner. And I said, I want to write a book. The universe just said, tell Sarah this information in this moment. And I did. I said, I want to write a book. And she said, oh, great. I actually know somebody else who writes New Yorker, shouts, who just published a book. And it turned out to be Susanna Fogel, who's she's actually a director. She directed the Mila Kunis, Kate McKinnon, that spy movie. She directed a ton of stuff. So I talked to Susanna, a TV director, and she introduced me to her agent. And her agent is the one who ended up being my literary agent, which is not a normal path. That's how I got my agent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you asked, right? You said what?
Yeah. And did she read anything of yours before she agreed to be your agent?
Yeah, she read, because I had a Google Doc, I had cleaned it up, and that's what she read. And then she worked with me for free for 9 full months.
Wow.
To turn those pages into something much, much better. And then on the proposal, and she wouldn't let anything by. That's another reason it was such a good proposal. She was wild about the details, and it had to be the best. And she never said it that way, but she wouldn't let me progress until it was perfect. She's still my agent.
So that 600 page Google Doc, did that become the book or did that become the
Yeah,
pitch
it
or
became the
both?
source material for the book. And a pitch in publishing, there's like a boilerplate template,
Yeah.
marketing, why, all these different things. So some of the 600 pages ended up in the template, but mostly the 600 pages were the meat of the book.
So it seems like the development of your book pitch was much more enjoyable and very different from the development of the TV show based on your book.
Yes,
Yeah. So how was
100%.
the development different, if you can talk about it?
The development, how can I talk about this? When it's a book and it's your own, you're in charge. You're the boss. They say TV is a writer's medium. Books, really a writer's medium. And at the end of the day, it's what do I want to say? And there aren't very many barriers to anything because it's just a book. Like, no one, they already approved it. And so in TV, first off, I didn't want to do a straight up adaptation. I wanted to do something fictional based off of the book. So that was its own. I really liked that period of imagining what could this be. But the I wasn't in charge of the pitch process. If you're at a studio and you're with a fancy showrunner and all these things, I wasn't running things anymore. And I really didn't like how things went.
Yeah. It's really different when you're in the creator seat and you have all these cooks in the kitchen. And it just makes every step so difficult because the voice gets scattered a million different
Yeah.
ways. It's just really
Yeah.
a frustrating process.
And
you know?
had they been cooks in concert with me,
Had we been cooking the same meal,
had we been cooking the same meal, I would want
right.
a haute cuisine
Right.
chef. I
Mhm.
was really happy to be the sous chef because
Right.
again, I actually hadn't written in TV. So then I
Mhm.
was happy to ask questions and happy to be a beginner. And I actually went out saying that to everybody. I'm a beginner. I'd like to be paired with people who know more than me, please.
Mhm.
And so if that had happened, that would have been great, but that is not what happened at all.
Yeah. I do find the TV system, I came from what I call real jobs before I became a TV writer and a comedian and things like that. And I find the TV system so discombobulating, so unstructured, so hard to navigate because of just the lack of structure. I really think it's just a complete lack of structure, even when you get into the development process, even when you get into these like really large corporations that are making TV shows. But we have stumbled into an area that now I kind of really want to talk about because first of all, I feel like we've totally trashed TV writing, which is not the first time I've done it on this show. I want people to know for real what they're getting into instead of the perception of what it is that you're getting into.
And I think it used to be something very different, by the way.
Maybe,
When
yeah.
I grew up dreaming about being a TV writer, there weren't mini rooms and
Yes.
things weren't scattered across all these different niche platforms. And, as everything becomes more fractured, eventually it'll become bundled again. So,
Yeah.
you have all these streamers, they're going to have to bundle those things. And maybe at that point, it will be some return of some kind to
Maybe.
any kind of
Let's see.
normalcy. But I do think that's worth pointing out that it's just a very different job than it was.
It is a very different job, and it's a different job now than when I started,
I'm
so
sure.
like it was a different job before I started and it's a different job now,
There was like a golden era where you could make a lot of money and be in a room and have some job security because it was 24 episodes and all those things.
Yes.
I don't think that's the case now. I'm really curious now that you're talking about it. I want to call it. This is now on my to-do list and be just like, what's it like right now? What are you going through?
Well, real talk, Tara.
Yeah.
We're off the heels of the strike, and I've personally kind of taken a sabbatical type of time off from like trying to staff and trying to do all these things because I really wanted to focus on my own projects. I haven't been able to do that for a really long time. And when I was talking to my manager about like what's the state of the industry right now in case, just so that I know, and it's wobbly, it's getting back on its legs. A lot of people are still not staffed, and if they are staffed, it's in a small room, it's in this, it's in that. So it's wobbly and it's getting back on its feet, but either way, whether or not
Yeah.
we're off the heels of a strike, I think there's just a sea change period. I really
Yeah.
do.
I agree.
Yeah, and I think it's because of the world and the country and all of the social movements that have happened and all of the fear that we've been living under for so many years, and like all of the things that have just made people reevaluate, me included, me specifically. And I think it's done the same to you. And where am I going with this ultimately is that do you think, I mean, you're not in the industry as much anymore. So I don't even know if you have an answer to this, but I feel like when you were an exec at Comedy Central, and I don't remember the name of the other exec, I think her name was Rachel.
Yeah, Rachel.
Yeah, Rachel. I think you guys were both kind of in a space where you were already talking a little bit about possibly wanting to leave, possibly wanting to do something different. So I kind of feel like that sea change was starting. It was already starting back then.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
never wanted to be an executive. So even as I fought to get a development job, I think probably the reason that you liked me and that I took it more as a like cultural thing, if that makes sense. Like I just wanted to be around writers because I love
You seem to
writers.
love comedians as well.
I
Yeah.
love comedians. I
Yeah.
love writers. I just wanted to be around them and
Mhm.
get obstacles out of their way because that's what I would have wanted as a writer, as opposed to, I want to run this network one day. Like
Mhm.
there was no job above mine that I wanted ever. I always would have preferred to be a writer. So for me, it wasn't even, it was, I've never said this out loud in a public way, but it definitely was, I always thought of it as a springboard. I never thought of it as my final destination. It was just going to be and I didn't know exactly how it would work. And that's another reason in those 4 years of misery that I stayed at Comedy Central, because I intuited that that brand would be important to me somehow. I didn't know how, but it was better to work at Comedy Central than a coffee shop where nobody knew me. There was like
Right.
nothing. So yeah, I always knew. But and I think that's why I was so not ego driven. I think a lot of executives feel like they need to say something because they need to prove that they're worthwhile, that their job matters, and will give notes based off that. And it's a really hard job actually, and I don't
Mhm.
knock executives. What nobody sees is the unbelievable amount of politics, red tape, difficulty behind the scenes, and you really need a good executive to help a TV show just get on the air, frankly.
Yeah.
But I think that's why, like, I didn't have a dream of like running Netflix, like, so it just was never where I was coming from. So you're
Yeah.
absolutely right.
And then the other sea change I'm noticing. So it's that sea change, and by that I'm talking about like people in Hollywood kind of seeking something else, whether it's more creativity, whether it's whatever, like, and from all levels, whether it is artists or creatives, whether it is executives, where it is. But I have so many people that I know that like either were talking about wanting to do something else, but so anyway, so this sea change has been going on for quite a while. But the other thing that happened was that I was listening to
Oh,
you on Expanded,
yeah.
which is one of my favorite podcasts. I recommend it all the time. And you mentioned in that podcast that you had gotten laid off from Comedy Central, and I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, I didn't
Yeah,
leave willingly. I
yeah.
was I was booted out of that job.
Which is hilarious
Yeah.
because I wouldn't, because I wouldn't have assumed. So you would have never left that job
No, I
probably. Yeah.
literally at the time Lily's was coming out, and I my friends were like, "What are you doing? You can't do both of these things. Quit, quit, quit." And I was like, "No, no, no. You don't understand. This job is me."
So that's really crazy to me because I would have, in my mind, the way that it would have worked is that you would have gotten laid off. And then out of desperation, this book that you had been thinking about, writing notes for years, it's now pedal to the metal, shit or get off the pot. We got to put this together. We got to put this out. But that is not actually how it
No.
happened, which is crazy to me. What was keeping you from embracing the fact that you are now an author? Like, what was it?
Fear.
Right. But fear of,
Fear of being poor,
right.
fear of struggle.
But wait, you weren't that poor because you sold the book.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
So it was all money trauma.
Yeah.
Like money has directed my behavior more than any other, parent, God, whatever. Money has been this force in my life. And I grew up thinking that money was the only thing that mattered. If you had money, you were successful and worthwhile. And if you didn't, you had no value. You had no worth. And I was scared because things like going to the dentist weren't a given. It was really boom or bust. We'd go on a vacation to Hawaii, but I can't get a doctor's appointment to get something checked out. My parents drive Mercedes, but I'm there when they get repossessed. Houses foreclosed on. It was really bad. And so for me, even now, I won't lie, I'm doing very well. And I've really had to notice when I'm thinking in scarcity and I'm like, oh my God, can you afford $18 pad thai from Uber Eats? I can get completely triggered and out of my mind. And I mean, this is a few years ago when this actually happened. I was looking at Uber Eats, $18 pad thai. I start crying. My heart's racing. It's like survival. And I thought, oh my God, something's really off. I really need to investigate this. And when you live in that kind of money distress, you're hardwired to believe that the absolute worst thing is just around the corner. So
Right.
I thought if I become a writer, I'm going to be poor, I'm going to struggle, then I'm going to be homeless, then I'm going to die. And there were no in between steps. Nobody takes me on their couch in this scenario. I can't get another job as a barista in this scenario.
Right.
I just die.
Right.
And that's always the hallmark of trauma thinking. It's extreme. Right. It doesn't make any sense.
Existential. It's always existential.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So fear, money fear, I would say more than anything else was why I didn't jump. Why I never willingly jumped into being a writer. They literally had to kick me out. Yeah. And then I had to already have a book. So my first book came out at the basically same time that I got laid off, which was the beginning of the pandemic. So I had to be also have a book out, actually be a writer, a published author before I was willing to take on that identity. And even then I was interviewing for other executive jobs, which made no sense. I was so scared. I just wanted money. Mm-hmm. And so I had this idea. I need to get this amount of dollars to keep with my lifestyle, etc. And one day it occurred to me at yet another development executive job that I didn't really want. Oh, I should try to figure out how to make money doing the thing I like, not chasing this thing that I know isn't for me. And even then it took a good year for me to embrace being a writer, despite success.
Yeah. So what finally made it click for you?
It's still a work in progress. I think I'm 4 years into being a professional author. I make basically what I made at Comedy Central. And only now am I like my heart's racing right now. I'm like, oh, should you have told her that? That's such a oh my God, now you're jinxed yourself and everything's going to go,
no way.
Yeah, it really is still something that I'm grappling with.
Mm-hmm. Well, that I really, really appreciate your honesty, Tara. I think you have done something that is really Cool. And,
Thank you.
something super surprising that I just would have never expected. Like I was so shocked when I saw your book come out. I was just like, there, Tara has a whole other side of her. She has a whole other, identity that I just really, really want to get to know. And I'm just so glad that you got your book out. I'm glad you've landed where you've landed. Is there anything that you would do differently? And is there anything that you can teach us from your experience?
The thing I wish I had done differently, but I'm not sure is possible, is I didn't need to suffer as much as I did. I treated myself so poorly. And yes, that self criticism was a big driver and helped me achieve, but it also completely tore me down. And the amount of questioning I did about, can I do this career? Can I do this thing? I just wish someone had put me in extreme trauma therapy. That's like the only thing I could have done different was go get EMDR quicker than I ended up getting it, which is a type of therapy for trauma. And then what I think I can say really emphatically is yes, there are outside forces that are going to govern your career. Yes, for sure. But you have so much more agency than you think. You know, I wouldn't, right now, I don't want to be a TV writer because it's just not exciting in the same way that honestly, me making Instagram videos is. Because if I make an Instagram video, I'm in control. That's 100% mine. It can travel way further. Like, way more people are going to see it than if they saw it on TV. And I can do it right this instant. And so I'd really encourage people, even if what you want is to be a TV writer, I'd encourage just grab the means of production for anything you actually can do today and do it, because writing begets writing, projects beget projects. You get better, you flex your muscles, just start. What's not helpful is to hem and haw about, oh, the industry sucks and I can't do it. And, oh, I don't have enough time. And, oh, there's something wrong with me. I spent years before I actually wrote that pilot, actually, just feeling guilty about not writing. I wake up every day. Every day I'd feel guilty about not writing. And that guilt got to be so bad that it was easier to write than not to write, and sort of started this process. But that whole guilt, terrible thing, if anyone's feeling that, just start writing. That's the cure.
Absolutely. The last thing I want to tell you, Tara, before I say thank you so much for coming on the show and being a fantastic guest, is that I wrote a joke about you coming to my house after George Floyd and bringing me cookies, and I want you to know about it.
Yeah, tell me.
Because if you ever hear it, you should know it's about you.
Oh, wow. I'm honored.
So basically the joke is that what I talk about, the joke is about like having allies versus friends. Like when like George Floyd changed my friendships, like all my white friends became allies,
Yeah.
instead of friends. And then like I talk about someone bringing me chocolate chip cookies, like I'm sorry about racism cookies,
Yeah.
after George Floyd, like, George Floyd, which I'm so glad I could laugh about it now,
Yeah.
because it was such a sweet gift, but the
Thank you.
joke that I made out of it was that the cookies weren't gluten free, and if you had been my friend, you would know that, but you were an ally, so
Well, but in a
yeah.
bitter twist of fate,
What?
I actually knew that you were
You
allergic to
did?
gluten because it was my favorite sketch.
Yeah,
I was just so committed
of
to
course.
buying from a black owned bakery.
That is
And
hilarious.
that in that whole thing, I was trying to, because there was cookies, I think there might have been something else too. And I was like, I can only buy from black owned businesses.
Right.
I need to go into, I think I went to Compton. Like I had a whole
That is
plan.
so funny.
But and they were, I'm sorry about racism.
They were.
Cookies. Yeah, totally.
It
I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry about racism. Profoundly.
It was so funny. It was really, really funny. It was such a it was just such a weird time. Like I just
I can't
that
believe
whole
that
time.
was my reaction. Also, that was my reaction. Was like,
I mean,
bring people cookies.
I honestly like, I'm like, what? what is anyone supposed to do right now? Like
Yeah.
to express our incredible, pain and, just grief over
Yeah.
what is happening,
It was
So
awful.
yeah,
Yeah. I don't know
it
what
was
it
super
says about
surreal.
me. Like, I don't know what it says about me that in crisis, in this horrible grief, what I thought to do was put together gift baskets, essentially.
I thought it was very sweet, and of
Thank you.
course, I made fun of it.
Yeah. As you have every right to do
And that's
so.
what you get, Tara, because you love being around comics, so you get made fun of.
Not the first time. Not the first
100%.
time.
100%. Well, you're such a delight. You're a wonderful human. Thank you so much for bringing your honesty to the show and talking about this process. I'm so happy for you, dude. I really
Thank
am so
you.
happy for you. That's all. Thank you so much, Tara
Thank,
Schuster.
thank you for having me.
Damn. Tara's been through it. She has had such a wild ride, and I'm so excited for her future and the books that she's going to be authoring. If you haven't checked out By the Fucking Lilies, it is on my list. I hope it's on your list. Check it out. She also has a follow-up book called Glow in the Fucking Dark. So she's unstoppable. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you got a lot out of it as usual. Until next time, homie, get out there, get to work.